Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have with us in our studio Gangaji, the author of this book, The Diamond in Your Pocket. Gangaji has been around for a long time, speaking with people actually across the world about her experiences of herself, really, and the work that she did with Papaji, her teacher in India. Gangaji has been on the path for many, many years and is just one of those extolled, exalted teachers, guides really, who has been speaking from her heart to people about what she sees as the nature of reality, the nature of self, the nature of happiness, and how really close it is, that there's nowhere to go except to ourselves. So we'll be speaking with Gangaji about this and her new wonderful book that's being acclaimed everywhere it's being read. And we're very pleased to have her with us today to share with us her wisdom gathered and over many, many years. Hello, Gangaji.
Hello, thank you. That's beautiful.
Absolutely. Great to have you.
Thank you, thank you.
So, I know something of your past, but maybe we'll just share it in capsule form with our audience. You were born in Mississippi.
Yes.
You were married to a doctor. You had a beautiful child. And then what?
I was still miserable.
Even though you were married to a doctor?
Right, I did the right thing. I made the good marriage, I had a good child, and I did what I thought would help me escape my misery. And I really had no external reasons for my misery. I mean, I was in the middle class, I was fed, I was educated, but I was miserable. I was neurotic.
Everything on the outside
everything
was
looked good.
according
I was
to...
actually a success. I had done what I was programmed to do, what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I was deeply unhappy. And so I figured there must be something really wrong with me. Well, I was
Did you
certain
feel that you were in love with your husband? And
I loved him. I loved him, but when I look back now on it, I see that I really married him because he could help me escape from my family.
From the misery of your family.
So I thought that would be it. Yeah. So I took my first escape with him, and I am indebted to him forever because he was a beautiful man, and he was a good husband. But of course, it didn't solve the underlying misery. And so then I had to escape from him. That became the next escape that I had to do. And so I divorced my husband, and before we divorced, we moved to San Francisco. And so it was in the early 70s, and San Francisco was just hopping. Everything was happening. And I realized I was miserable. I left my marriage, and I then turned to a spiritual search. I thought, well, this will save me. You know, the right marriage didn't, but now this will. And
marriage to God.
Marriage to God. Well, first there was also marriage to politics. There was that social action, and then marriage to like the freedom of the 70s, and each time being let down and just wondering, what am I doing wrong? What's happening here? Because all along my basic intention from being a little girl was just to be happy, just to live a happy life. Yeah. And I didn't translate that as spiritual until I did. I mean, for me it was material when I married my husband, and it was spiritual because the subculture was spiritual. Yeah. And these were all just impositions on something that I was trying to get out of in myself, and finally realized I couldn't after many years and many spiritual paths and wonderful experiences and beautiful teachers and great glimpses of peace and happiness, and yet nothing seemed to be really lasting or abiding or established. And so I reached a point in 88, 89 where I recognized I've done what I can do. I need help. And my husband, my second husband also, we were on a spiritual search together, also said, I need help. So we said it together, which was quite beautiful.
Interesting.
And we didn't know what that meant.
Like synchronized.
It was synchronized, and I'm very grateful for that because we were able to support one another in that. And we both were just praying for a teacher, not knowing what that meant. I mean, I had an idea that the teacher would be maybe some kind of goddess teacher. Mm-hmm. I was liberated female. I thought, you know, yeah. Maybe it's the whole goddess culture. Sure. And
enter Durga.
Yes, really. Well, I wasn't being Durga.
Okay, Lakshmi.
Something like Virgin Mary goddess.
Oh,
type.
I see.
Lakshmi would be good. And my husband was into the Sufis, so he expected it to be a Sufi teacher, and it was none of that. We met our teacher, Papaji, and he just blew away every concept of form of teacher, being anything that you know or can conceptualize, and that's the grace. And that's really the power of a true prayer, that it's answered. So I prayed, and my prayer was answered, and I paid attention to the answer. And so that's really what then I'm bringing to anyone else who's interested, who's calling out for help.
Now, you spent time with Papaji, not even a whole lot of time chronologically.
That's right.
Do you feel that what happened in his presence was a transmission?
Yes, absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely. There were words used, because he also believed that understanding was very important, but what was transmitted, understanding couldn't touch. In fact, I could have said the words he was saying. I had a certain degree of sophisticated spiritual understanding, and even non-dual understanding. But his transmission is just this unspeakable oneness, really.
Yeah.
So it's your own heart speaking to you.
So I guess I'd like to know, and I think others would also like to know, what is that about? Because see, let's say this, we meet you, we listen, we meet other teachers. Eckhart Tolle, who also, it should be said, is wrote the introduction to this book, and who is such a favorite of mine as well.
Yes.
And we have an experience of ourselves through the reading. So there is a transmission there, you could say.
That's right.
And these are words that we all really know. We really know. If you've been on this path for some time, we can all more or less recite the spiritual grammar, the lexicon, so to speak. What happened in that transmission? What is its nature? And is it needed, do you think, for other people to become fully and, say, permanently awake?
Well, what happens is, or what happened for me, and what I've seen happen, is that the mind stops. So I use the phrase, I was stopped in my tracks. Yeah. I was absolutely stopped. And that was also what his teaching was, stop. Stop right where you are. And so there was the transmission, the stopping. And then I could feel the arising of this very strong tendency to go somewhere, in the sense of, okay, now what was that? How do I keep that? What did I just get? Is this real? How can I make this bigger? That's going. And he was very astute, and he said, no, stop. No, really stop. No, stop deeper. And the transmission was this oceanic grace that was in him, that was an invitation to discover that that's my own self. That what I was seeing in him, that I was loving and I was awed by, and that I could discover when I stopped, was my own self, is oneself. And so the transmission is mysterious, because not everybody felt that with Papaji. Many people did. Not everybody will feel it reading certain words, but if you do feel it in a piece of art or music or words on a page or with a person, it's very important, and it's to be honored, because there's something there for you. And I recognize that, luckily, because I had glimpses of that with other teachers and teachings and in meditation. But I was there to really receive what he had to give. And he said, what I have to give is freedom. That's all I'll give you. And for that, you have to lose everything else you have. Yeah. And it was like, well, all right, I'm ready. Because I'd tried whatever else I knew.
That's an interesting price to pay for.
Yes, it's the price. And it's well worth it.
And yeah.
And I could see that in him, because I could see that this is not a miserable man who's given up something. I mean, he gave up everything, and then paradoxically, as we all have learned, you then receive everything. But to realize that, you really do have to give up everything. And that's the challenge.
And what we're really giving up, Gangaji, is our attachment.
Yes.
Is that so?
Yes, I'm not speaking of even anything material.
Right.
And that's in a moment of just stopping.
Yeah.
Because our attachment primarily is to the conceptualization of this awesome power of the mind, which is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the power of mind. It's beautiful. It's wondrous.
Absolutely.
It can cause great beauty and great harm. But before that is the truth of who one is.
I feel this is so true.
Yeah,
it is.
Also.
It is also. Is that so? And it is.
Yes.
It's like, it's the identity with the mind that perpetuates our idea of ourselves.
That's right. That's the key
word. Keeps us
word.
going on a track of, and that's something that you speak about in the book very beautifully, is the story we have of ourselves.
Yes.
Who we are, who we see ourselves as, and the story that we perpetuate, distinct from who we are.
Right. And the story of who we are is appearing in who we are. So it's not that the story, our life story, is separate from who we are.
Right.
It's just that we aren't limited by that story.
Yes.
And no matter how big we make that story, still the truth of who one is, everyone, is beyond limit. And so the invitation to stop was to really stop telling your story. Stop thinking yourself for one moment and see what's here.
Well, I'll tell you, in reading the book, it brought me to a place of, I guess, if I were to use words, utter preciousness.
Oh.
Really, as the space of the sacred, where I got it. Again.
Yeah.
I got it. And that is I don't want to say my story, but my observation over time, and I've been in so many different contexts, and it's like 1 minute awake, 1 minute fast asleep, another minute super awake. It's just, and I've had those experiences, but then they become experiences, which becomes memory, which is memory. So what is the through line that allows for, we call abiding or permanent state? How can you have a permanent state in a world of impermanence?
Well, you don't have a permanent state because states are impermanent. So,
by definition.
Right. So what has to be discovered is what's never moved, what's never been absent, even in what you call very asleep or deep asleep. There was always awareness of that sleep. So the awareness itself was awake. And in the state of great bliss and oceanic understanding, there's awareness of that. So that awareness is the constant. When we identify that awareness with a state that's celebrating that awareness, then we assume that we've lost it when that state passes. But if you don't identify that awareness with anything, you just simply stop trying to keep some state from coming in, or stop trying to lose some state that's on its way out. Just turn your attention to what's always here, already always here. And that's awareness, pure awareness.
Instead of being like a traffic cop, we'll take this state, but we won't take that one. No,
Exactly.
Come
That's right.
forward, stop.
Because obviously some states are much more pleasant than others, and there's nothing wrong with loving bliss states. And bliss states are healing, and they're teachers in themselves. But the truth is what's here before any state, and during any state, and after any state. And you are the truth. And to realize that, then, it doesn't mean that you don't like good states or like bad states. It just means that you aren't identified. You use that word, identified.
Exactly.
That's it. You're not identified with the state. You're identified with who you are.
Really.
Yeah. Which really is not separate from anything.
Right.
And that's the non-dualistic.
So when somebody is depressed, let's say, they feel depressed, they just feel down, let's just say. how is it that one can be in touch still with that deep, true radiance that one really is?
Well, there are many ways, you know. I mean, when people come to me and they're very depressed, I tell them to get support for their depression, first of all, because as you know, there are many healing modalities that can actually assist you that are here.
Yeah.
And so I'm not trying to take the place of any of those healing modalities. I love them and respect them and was a practitioner at one time of them. So it's just that even in the deepest depression, if you tell the truth, if you're willing to tell the truth and not resist the depression and not try to deny the depression or not tell some story about how horrible the depression is, just to take one split second and not do anything, in the core of this negative state, there is the light of awareness, that which is aware of the depression. And that's free of all depression. Now, if the depression is some kind of physiological disease, I think it needs to be cleared up. But you can, even before it's cleared up, you can discover this. But if you have a broken arm, clear up your broken arm. But even, you know, if you're on the path and your arm is broken and you're waiting for help, before help comes, just take a moment and see what's whole, what's unbroken, even in this brokenness of spirit or emotions or body. Then that turns the mind towards what's omnipresent, what's continually here. And that was really your question, or what I heard.
That's right. That's right.
Because finally that's what you want. You want. I mean, we know, we love our good experiences, but they're unreliable, as all experiences are.
Exactly.
But what is reliable is what's solidly always here.
Now, here it is many years after Papaji's passing, and you're being with him and being physically present for the transmission, etc. Do you feel that you remain always in touch with your own inner radiance?
Well, I wouldn't call it my own inner radiance. I'm not always in touch with that. But I'm never absent from myself. That doesn't mean that I don't have periods of negative emotion or opinion or judgment.
Right.
I mean, there's a human animal here that's functioning.
Yes.
So this human animal is not purified in that sense. I mean, maybe it's more than it was.
In other words, you are participating in the dual world.
Very much, because that's not separate from
the non-dual.
The non-dual.
Yes.
So it's what's part of this incarnation. This incarnation has a limited time. Before this incarnation, I am, but not as this carnation.
Surely.
Right now I am as this carnation, but not just as this carnation and incarnation. So I'm never unaware of myself, but I'm also often aware of negative and positive and fluctuations within the...
In reality, then, you are going with the flow, to use a phrase, and with the light of awareness.
Well, I'd say the flow is going through the light of awareness. Okay. And that's what allows... Because even if I say I'm going with the flow, that I don't want anyone to get the idea that I'm always happy, or I'm always...
Surely.
Whatever, I'm not.
Sure.
But the ground is always radiant.
Yes.
And happiness and unhappiness are the waves that appear and disappear on that ground. Yeah. And that was the flip for me. Because before I would have happiness and unhappiness, but the ground seemed to be this basic suffering. And so somehow in my meeting with Papaji and my actually following his instructions and receiving him into my heart, that flipped. So that hasn't changed.
Would you then describe the change that has happened in you and the change that happened in Papaji as having a physiological basis?
Well, they're physiological byproducts, I would say. The basis is a soul basis. I mean, it's so deep that the physiology has to be affected.
Non-material soul basis that then becomes expressed through the material physical form.
And some parts of the form, I mean, I still have some physical ailments that I had before, and some physical ailments were cleared up. I mean, there were changes. It definitely shook up the whole physiology.
Yes.
But the essence was really deeper than the physiology. And with Papaji too. I mean, Papaji had high blood pressure and diabetes. I think that's a guru's disease, actually.
Yeah,
diabetes.
right.
All the sugar they eat.
The love of ice cream.
Yeah. And those great Indian sweets.
Exactly. Divine substances.
Yeah, and you know, he also lived as a human being. Now, his teacher, Ramana, was a sadhu, so that's a different matter. He was a saint and a sadhu. And of course I wasn't with him, so I couldn't speak from first-hand account, but he also had moods and different states, but he lived from just the discovering the truth of who one is, and then naturally, without a should have to, giving one's life to that.
Yeah.
Because Ramana wouldn't have even called himself a teacher. He was just himself. And that's the invitation to really discover yourself and be yourself.
Yeah.
Be yourself.
Yeah, right, exactly. Now, it's so interesting. It seems like a core part of your teaching, this teaching, and the teachings that largely come from the East have so much to do with disidentification with ourselves as persona, as body, as mind. And once that disidentification occurs, it opens up the vast space for people. I kind of experience this in terms of images. It's like this incredible backlighting, and we're on the stage as a little self. But before we as a self say a word, there's this huge, vast luminosity that we are from, and in fact we are probably just a projection of, after all. Do you know?
I love this. It's beautiful, beautifully said and imaged.
And so if we can realize that that luminosity is what is prior to the identification, and not separate from, but actually an emanation of.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because I had as a child, this love of God, and but that was still, and it was part of my Christian upbringing. That was still something to get to.
Yes.
To recognize that
Reaching
you were
for
separate.
God.
You were a sinner. You were
Right.
separate was essential, and then to get busy getting there. And of course, it's hopeless. You can only be saved, and so then praying to be saved, and then finally a disillusionment for any help coming.
Yeah.
And that's when a real prayer is made. Help.
Yes.
I need help.
Yes. But disillusionment is so much part of the process.
Yes.
I mean, you and your husband were perfectly positioned as disillusioned souls for having your prayer work that brought you to Papaji.
That's right.
You know, and it's always been classically, according to my understanding, a part of the path. Disillusionment must be a part.
That's essential. And either at that point you turn towards cynicism, or you turn towards surrender, and really asking for help. The mind is humbled.
Yeah.
And when the mind refuses to be humbled, it becomes cynical. And when it surrenders and recognizes the limits, then there's space.
Exactly.
And this prayer is answered. It's guaranteed to be answered, because really it's you're calling from your own heart.
Yeah, and you're part of everything.
Yeah.
So it's
you're
like
calling yourself.
That's right.
But not yourself as you can define or think yourself.
Not. Another image that I'd like to float out to get your sense of, which I use for these kinds of things, is sort of like either take the light spectrum or the sound spectrum, and there's what we have as the visual light range, and then the non-visible, which is much, much, much larger than the visible, the invisible, and same with the audio range.
That's right.
To me, that's like the expression of the whole nature of the universe.
That's right.
It's right there.
And you know, at certain points, you actually hear what you'd never heard before, or you see a whole range of light and color, or you know of an animal or another creature that sees or hears. And that opens the mind to recognizing there's more than any one mind can conceive.
Yes, exactly. Oh,
and it's
beautiful.
good news.
Yes, it's good news.
It's very good news.
The vastness of the universe.
Yeah.
From that point of view, since it's all ours and we are each other, and there is no true separation, what we're witnessing when we step back and observe, one, our own minds, but also our beautiful planet, is we see incredible destruction, deforestation, physical violence, wars, et cetera, et cetera. And I know it's all based on some profound misunderstanding of not seeing the truth of who we are and that we are one another. And basically we're fighting with ourselves.
That's right.
Is really what's going on. What do you see, Gangaji, as the role of people who are on, I don't even like using the phrase on the path, people who are interested in cultivating this awareness, let's say, this witness awareness, et cetera, relative to this outer picture where we really are dealing with jeopardizing oxygen levels on the planet, you know, and then we can't have a party at all, you know?
Yeah, we're spoiling our nest.
Exactly. What do you see as the role of people who are seeking to be kind of mature and responsible spiritually relative to this material matter?
Well, you know, people are used in different ways, is the way I see it. And,
I see.
Because Ramana actually was not active politically at a time in India when it was horrible, horrendous.
God,
I really just support people in following their heart of hearts, not necessarily the emotional heart, the sentimental heart, but in the core of one's being. It is possible to discover how you can be used to support it all. I mean, Ramana he supported all of us, and yet he didn't do that intentionally to support us. He did it just by being himself. And yet, for someone else, it may be phrased very differently in the mind.
Exactly.
In general, though,
I see.
What I've seen with people who are socially aware or active is that, and for myself, when I was politically active, that it was driven by so much wanting to change them, wanting to get them to change, because I am relatively enlightened to what they're doing, and not even that that's wrong in terms of reality, but it's not skillful and it doesn't work. And
as we have seen,
it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't work. And so the willingness to really tell the truth about that, and to recognize that you know, it essentially all can come from love, all of it. That you can be opposed to a president and policies without hating that president and policy, or your parents, or the people who are deforesting the world without hating them. And then there's a possibility that really will be new to the world and to the species.
Well, on that note of love, I want to just thank you so much for coming and sharing your words with us and your hearts.
Thank you, Mitchell. I really, really enjoyed being here.
So
thank
glad.
you all.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and it enriched you as much as it did me. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week.